Hi everyone, this is Paul here for the Magdalene Centre. Today I'm doing an astrology report for Saturn retrograde in Capricorn, which starts on the 29th of April and finishes on the 17th of September. Now, by outlining some of the key themes and lessons this retrograde brings to us and giving an overview of what it all means. Before I do that, I just want to clarify, as I always do, that the astrology doesn't control our lives. It gives us a framework to help us understand what is unfolding around us and helps to recognise where the key lessons are for us to be learning at this time in order to move forward. And it shows us what kind of growth, or shows us the different ways that we can grow at this time if we so choose. But for anything to actually change in our lives, it requires that we take action, and it also requires that we take responsibility for the choices that we make, and that we utilise the knowledge of the astrology and apply it in our lives. Because it's all well and good knowing something or being forewarned, but for anything to change, it also requires that we be willing to take action, and especially be willing to change our current way that we take action so it's guided by wisdom rather than just the old comfortable habits. Now, in terms of Saturn retrograde, before I go into that itself, I just want to quickly cover Saturn because I thought it's kind of necessary. Whenever we think of Saturn, we tend to think of fate or karma or external events. So Saturn tends to be seen as something that's external to us, but the fact is Saturn, like all the other planets, is actually symbolic of an archetype. It's an aspect of the collective mind, and wherever Saturn is for each of us personally, that's where we have to employ discipline and patience and learn to develop the strength on our own, because it's an area that it's a core weakness, if you like, that we then have to have the discipline to strengthen it. So with Saturn, it's all about showing us where our core weaknesses are and where we're leaving ourselves open to come, or where we're not strengthening key areas which could potentially undermine other areas going forward. So Saturn is that part of the mind that shows us the consequences of current courses of action. To the ego, it's seen as something that's malefic, or something that's initiating fate, or bringing fated events to us. But the fact of the matter is, if we truly believe in the spiritual laws, then we have to understand that the events that come to us or that we experience are initially ultimately something that we've initiated through a course of action, usually unconsciously. But if we reject what happens to us, or we don't take responsibility consciously, then our more powerful unconscious mind will draw experiences to us to try and wake us up and try and show us where there's a key weakness in our personality or approach that needs to be changed. And this is a key theme that unfolds during Saturn's retrogrades. This is the time to understand who are we really and which projects actually align with who we are, because Saturn is like the hard taskmaster. It's the teacher that shows us ultimately shows us how to manifest things externally, but only if we're prepared to take responsibility for it. So until we're prepared to take responsibility or prepared to apply discipline in our lives, the archetype of Saturn serves to limit the potential growth that we can achieve and the amount of freedom we can realistically expect to experience in life if we're not prepared to take responsibility. Because ultimately, the price of freedom is responsibility, the capacity to take full ownership of every aspect of our lives, to strengthen each area and master each area, if you like, so that we can stand on our own 2 feet. So Saturn is all about stripping away the crutches in our lives, so the things that we subconsciously lean upon to avoid pushing ourselves further, or to give us excuses for not doing things or allow us to procrastinate. Saturn is the part of the unconscious mind that is about removing the crutches. It's about testing our faith so that we achieve true faith. So with Saturn being in this home sign of Capricorn, Capricorn is all about the fulfillment of long-term goals in alignment with the natural laws. Anything that is driven purely by ego, Saturn retrogrades will tend to cause those projects to fail or to dissipate. The Saturn retrograde can be likened to a period where a butterfly, for a caterpillar to transform or go through metamorphosis and transform into a butterfly, it has to enter the chrysalis and cut itself off from all external influence in order for the internal changes to take place. This is what Saturn symbolically does during the retrograde period. The area that Saturn is retrograding through gets sealed off. It's like a chrysalis forms, and we don't experience much movement in that area, or if we do, it's only because we're going with the natural flow of events, or we're in alignment with the natural laws. But if it's an area that needs to undergo significant change, then we often experience frustration and a lack of forward movement here during Saturn retrograde, because the area is being curtailed and isolated from, or insulated rather, from what's going on around us, in order to allow that area to go through the necessary metamorphosis, in order to go from the caterpillar just gorging on everything and devouring everything willy-nilly and has no kind of responsibility, as it were, or has no care for anything else. When it goes into the chrysalis, the old self has to die. The ego often has its parameters shrunk, or the ego's struggle. The level of authority the ego holds is weakened during Saturn retrograde, because the point is, it's removing any projects in our lives that are not in resonance with who we really are. So Saturn is about stripping away what we think we need and what we think we want, and stripping away these to show us what we actually want based on what our soul's desire is. So this is a time where if we find things suddenly start slowing down, or we experience a curtailment of growth, then rather than resisting it, it's reflecting and figuring out, okay, is there a reason why this particular, or these particular projects, relationships, etc., seem to be faltering or not moving forward anymore? Is it because in the long run they don't serve the growth of our unfolding self, the part of us that is naturally unfolding as our consciousness expands over time? And if things don't serve our lives, then we owe it to ourselves to let go of them. But we also have to, if we want to become more empowered or achieve greater degrees of freedom in our lives, then we also have to let go of our attachments to the status quo. We have to let go of relying on other people to do things for us. It doesn't mean that we don't trust other people, as it were, but it's having the capacity to make sure that we can meet all our needs ourselves. And if other people choose to help us, then great, but we don't become dependent on them. So stripping away dependency and learning to stand on our own 2 feet, to have the capacity to own our own lives, to be the author of our own lives rather than being written into someone else's story. So it's choosing the story that we want to live in our lives, and it's choosing to maximize our potential through taking responsibility for ourselves, and to cultivate the necessary discipline to see any project that's worthwhile through to its completion. So Saturn brings us resources like patience, discipline, and the capacity to exercise control over our actions. But the one thing we do need to be careful of is that we don't allow fear to cause us to apply that control mechanism of Saturn to the emotions, in which case we end up feeling that emotional numbness, or that despair, or purposelessness, or hopelessness that sometimes gets attributed to Saturn, when in actual fact it's not. The archetype of Saturn as such is the fact that we're applying it in the wrong kind of way. We're applying it to the wrong things, are actions that we need to become objective with and bring them under control, so that we're pursuing the courses of action that will bring about the manifestation of the goals that are right for who we are. But for us to know what these goals are, we have to know ourselves. So Saturn in Capricorn, one of the key tools of this particular combination of light is solitude. Now, I'm not for 1 minute saying that we should become hermits, or that we cut ourselves off from our communities, or we stop seeing people. Solitude just means that we can take a few minutes out for ourselves every single day to check in with ourselves and to spend time in silence, free of distraction, so that we have a chance to get to know who we really are, to strip away what the ego is trying to do, and to have that time in spiritual devotion to figure out or connect with who we are and recognise where we're pursuing goals, or where we've been following a path that is based on egoic desire, or based on the ego's need for approval, social status, and seeking external forms of power. But if we truly want to become empowered, then we have to transform our relationship with power. We have to let go of the need to feel like true power is about the extent of controlling the environment so it doesn't affect us, and instead learning to become responsive to the environment. So rather than fighting everything off and seeing things as an enemy as such, when we encounter obstacles, they're necessary tests of faith, because if we don't have our faith tested, we'll never be able to extend the measure of our faith, as it were. So obstacles are part of growth. They're there to test our commitment and our devotion to a given project, whether it be something that we're creating externally or a state of being we're trying to create within ourselves. If we never experience obstacles, we never really gauge how deep our reserves of faith and commitment are. And so in some respects, whilst faith tends to be seen as a quality of Jupiter, because Jupiter allows us to tap into grace, if you like, Saturn is about that truth faith, where it's been tested, it's gone through those fires of transformation, if you like, it's gone through the school of hard knocks and facing situations which may seem impossible to the ego, but aren't, as it were, because no matter how intense or how strong some of the challenges we face may be, we'll never face a challenge that's greater than what we're capable of overcoming. So Saturn is all about that strength of spirit that can only be forged through facing adversity, through facing challenges, and being willing to let go of the crutches that we habitually hold on to in life. And if we seek to do everything in alignment with who we are, and make sure that what we do is something that our soul desires, as opposed to what our ego is saying that we should be pursuing, and we make sure that we align with the natural law, so we respect the laws of karma, we respect the need to take ownership of our own actions so we don't create more karma for ourselves, then we stand a good chance of achieving a degree of freedom that we haven't experienced before, along with unlocking deeper levels of potential within ourselves. The potential, in effect, the true potential is unlimited, but is limited by the extent of how much responsibility we're prepared to take for ourselves. If we're to take full responsibility for ourselves, then the potential is pretty much unlimited. So there's nothing. The only limit is the limit for what the mind can perceive, as it were. So it's about having that capacity to take ownership of ourselves and know ourselves enough to recognise when we've been pursuing things unconsciously, or pursuing goals which aren't right for who we are, and course correct. So that the Saturn archetype within us, if we're going down the wrong route, the unconscious mind will draw to us experiences designed to try and kick us out of that route and onto the path we should be. This is further emphasised by the fact that this Saturn retrograde is going to be conjunct the South Node in Capricorn for its entire duration. It won't be an exact conjunction, it will, but it'll be within 1 degree throughout. So this reinforces the need to shed old karma. This is, with the South Node in Capricorn, it's like the ripening of collective karma. This is a time where we have to face our own part of it and overcome it through having the capacity to, or the humility to, acknowledge where we've created the karma for ourselves in the past, and resolving to have the discipline to make sure we do not engage in the same kind of behaviour that could just cause us to reap more of the same. So if we're prepared to take responsibility for ourselves and be humble enough to recognise when we've done something that is not in resonance with who we are, or has caused damage to other people in some way, or has negative repercussions elsewhere, then if we can have the humility to acknowledge that, to own it, and to change the way we do things so that we don't create those situations again, then we free ourselves of old karma, we break the chains from the past, and we allow ourselves to achieve a greater degree of freedom, and we allow ourselves to develop that inner authority, which is Saturn's main aim, is to let go of seeking external authority to tell us what we should be doing, and instead take ownership of our own lives, take ownership of the way that we conduct ourselves, so that what we do is in alignment with natural laws, and that we do not do things at the expense of other people. So we overcome any tendency to try and control the environment and control other people, and instead use that control mechanism on ourselves to achieve that supreme self-control, so that we have that self-mastery, that allows us to choose how we respond to situations. So when things crop up which we may not have expected, or it creates a small obstacle towards the goal that we've set for ourselves, it's not throwing a hissy fit, it's not complaining about it or festering in resentment. It's overcoming these particular responses and instead saying, okay, what is this obstacle trying to teach, or what lesson does it bring, and how can I best learn that lesson to overcome this obstacle, and in the process develop a more resilient spirit, a greater degree of patience and perseverance, and a capacity to pause before acting and take measured actions. So actions guided by wisdom and guided by an understanding of the natural laws. So it's applying the natural laws. One way to think about it is, if Jupiter is the theory, Saturn is the practical. It's all well and good and having all these theories in our heads, but are they of any use whatsoever if we can't apply them? Saturn reminds us that it is not enough to know something. It is only useful if we actually can apply it in our own lives, and apply it in a way that is in alignment with natural law, so we don't create karma in the process. So if we want to become successful, then we have to take responsibility for achieving that success. If we want to become more internally empowered, then we have to take responsibility for doing the internal work needed to break the old conditioning that in the past would allow us to feel justified in reacting in certain ways. But if we understand why we do things, then we no longer really have an excuse for engaging in sabotaging behaviours. So Saturn retrograde is an excellent time for us all to slow down, to become more discerning of what we actually need in our lives, or what we actually want to be pursuing. And because Saturn often feels like it hits the brakes, it's also kind of about pushing us into the present time, into what we have to do now in order to achieve the goal. Because all goals are generally seen as a future aim, if you like, or future goalpost, but we never move closer to that goalpost if we do not live in the present moment and take the actions in the here and now necessary to make that goal a reality. If we want a goal to manifest, we have to work here and we have to work now. If we're not prepared to do that, then we have no real excuse, or we have no real right to complain about things if we don't get what we say we want, because we weren't prepared to do what was necessary in order to make that happen. And with Capricorn being a collective sign as well, this is also a time where, whilst Capricorn is more like enlightened, self-interested, knowing who we are, so climbing our own individual mountain, in the long run, whatever we do needs to be done with the mindset of how can it help the groups that we're part of, or how can it help the communities that we're in. Because Capricorn is the precursor to Aquarius, which is all about enlightening community. First, we must empower ourselves and achieve full mastery of ourselves and our capacity to utilise our resources wisely and in moderation, so that we don't engage in some kind of binging on material things or trying to bolster the ego through material successes. It's instead looking at focusing on the process. You can't climb a mountain without taking steps. You can't get to the top without taking slow step by step and progress, and you also can't really get there if you're holding on to a ton of unnecessary stuff. So if we want to achieve the goals which will bring true fulfillment for us, we also have to look at moderation and trimming the fat, if you like, stripping away what doesn't serve us in our lives in order to make necessary space and to lighten our spirits, to help us more towards that that goal of self-realization and the awareness of who we are as an individual, which then prepares us to come together in communities with like-minded people operating at the same kind of frequency or same level of awareness, to achieve truly collective goals which serve the community and not just the self. But Saturn is transit through Capricorn is reminding us to foster that self-discipline necessary to know who we are, to strip away the conditioning influences from society, and to overcome the glamour of social approval, and through solitude and spending time in silence with ourselves, knowing whether something is actually right for who we are. Because when we're in silence, we have nothing to distract us from ourselves. The only thing we have is ourselves, and if it's about learning to know ourselves and to learn to like ourselves as we are, if you like. So it's stripping away the negative ego and allowing discipline, patience and commitment to goals to be our guideposts or our main aims, and it's having that necessary, it's that wisdom as opposed to just knowledge, as it were. It's understanding the world around us, understanding our place within it, and it's having that supreme understanding of who we are. Because if we don't know who we are, if we do not illuminate our minds and transform them, we will never become our full self. We'll never express our true selves completely, because we'll always be doing things based on the status quo and based on what will bring us approval and reputation and social currency, if you like. So I hope this is a useful guide for Saturn retrograde. As I said, any fated experiences that we have during this time is not Saturn himself making things happen. It's the archetype within us drawing experiences to ourselves to help us awaken to negative tendencies or egoic tendencies which sabotage our efforts towards more meaningful goals, and show us where the need to develop greater discipline is required in order to achieve truly fulfilling goals. Because when we've employed discipline, patience and perseverance towards a goal, and we've resisted any tendency or any temptation towards taking shortcuts or taking the easy way out, we achieve that level of self-respect that no one can take away from us, because we know that what we did was done honestly. It was done, we put in a lot of effort and hard work to achieving it, and everything we did was based on truth and honesty and desire to achieve full personal integrity through aligning our words and our actions and saying what we mean, meaning what we say, and doing what we say we're going to do. And if we can have this discipline to commit to the goals and see them through to their completion, we achieve a level of self-esteem and self-respect that cannot be gained through just pursuing immediate gratification and pursuing easy goals that don't challenge us and allow us to stick to the comfort zone. Saturn is about developing the qualities that allow us to keep pushing out of the comfort zone and keep taking that one step at a time towards a goal, no matter how difficult the road towards a goal may be, if it's aligned with who we are and it's truly worth doing, then we will not allow fears, insecurities, or egoic desire for immediate gratification to derail us. Because if we do, we then experience the karmic side of Saturn, and events come that try and push us, the mind trying to draw events to us that will push us back on track. So the best thing for us to do is to avoid going off track in the first place by knowing ourselves and having the discipline to control our actions, control our desires, and have the capacity to deny ourselves short-term pleasures in order to gain long-term rewards. And the rewards that we gain are things like very powerful faith and capacity to manifest whatever it is that we desire to manifest, a alignment with the natural laws, so we no longer have to work hard in order to achieve things. It's more about working smart, because if we work smart and work in a way with a thorough understanding of the natural laws, then we no longer have to work as hard to achieve what we want and what we need or manifest for us, as long as we have the faith and we do not take actions which violate natural law. So may Saturn retrograde bring you many new insights, may it help you break free of old habits that undermine progress towards goals, and may this be a time where you achieve greater freedom through embracing self-discipline, patience, and spending time with oneself to know oneself fully and to recognise where desires are being conditioned by social influences, and to strip those ones away so that we're left with just the ones which resonate with our souls. So may Saturn retrograde bring you many insights and blessings. Take care.